Hi everyone, I'm Jesse Lynn.
And I'm Angela Lynn. Welcome back to another episode of But Where Are You Really From?
We're gonna hop right into it. Why is it so hard to make friends as an adult? This has all constantly been on my mind because, as y'all know, if y'all have been listening, I've been going through this social going out stage. I'm looking for different friends who will accompany me to do very different things, like friends who will go to the movies, friends who want to go rock climbing, friends who want to go to parties. As I got older, it became more and more difficult to make friends, not only because the opportunities are less, because, as you get older, the opportunities that you have to mingle, I feel like kind of go away a little bit. But I just feel like even when you're in a setting where you can make friends, it's very difficult to make a dent or any inroads with a new individual or friend group, and you really have to be out there all the time to kind of slowly sink into this friend group and make new friends. So this is what we're going to explore today, why it's so difficult to do that. Angela, do you have any other experiences to share as well?
My experience with that is, I mean, I agree with you, but also I had a little bit of a lag in needing to make friends as an adult because I was in New York, right, until a few years after college. So I felt okay with my friend group, up until that point because I had my college friends and then I had my work friends that all became very close. So I never felt like I needed new friends per se in New York. But then I went to business school from that point. And business school or any sort of grad school is funny because it is just another academic experience, right? So we lovingly refer to it as college 2.0. And it really was kind of that because sure we learned, but there was also a lot of partying. There was also a lot of just shenanigans. And it was a really nice excuse to, as an adult, be back in an environment where you are all allowed to and encouraged to make new friends because you don't know anyone else. I mean, there were certain people. So I went to University of Chicago for my MBA, and I'd say maybe a third of the people or more were local Midwest people, so those who had already lived in Chicago. But in this instance, so many of us came from outside of Chicago, so you had no network. So everyone was back to square one of I'm awkward and alone and I need friends. So then went through the whole process of finding our friend groups in those 2 years. And I'm so grateful for that experience because some of my current best friends, the ones I'm closest to, are from the 2 years that I spent in business school. Thinking back on the idea of making new friends now, it is really hard because especially now that work had become a place where part of it's remote, part of it's, work from home, you're not always in the office. Making friends in the office isn't necessarily a given anymore. And even I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but you don't always make friends at whatever job you're making. So then now also I've quit corporate life and I'm doing this full time, right? It's really hard to meet people. So I'm just the only instance I'm able to make new friends is totally in real life, quote unquote real life, right? So when I'm out doing life things at a coffee shop, doing a workout, going to a restaurant, whatever it may be. So it's really been quite interesting of trying to figure out what is a natural way to make friends. And I have actually made quite a few friends, I'd say in the last 2 to 3 years. A lot of it's been serendipitous or friends of friends, or because a certain environment was allowed that to be the case. But just the idea of oh, I want to be intentful to make friends, I don't really have that necessarily. And I find a lot of anxiety thinking about doing that.
Yeah, and maybe that is the trick. Kind of like how people say you fall into a relationship when you're not searching for one, is just to be out and about living your life and you will eventually pick up friends. And I found that to be true. But I think based off of what you're saying about your college experience and your kind of daily schedule of things, I really feel like the things that make making friends more difficult now is kind of the opportunity to be at a place consistently with people. And I also feel like it's tiring because when you're in these like collegiate environments or these like perfect environments to make friends, there's like a velocity at which you make friends, which is faster. It doesn't, at least for me, it doesn't feel as tiring because you're like there and the opportunities are all easily at your fingertips versus like now you don't really have that same kind of space. So it takes longer to build rapport with people.
Yeah, I also think it has to do with both people being in a state of vulnerability because if you are, for example, new to a neighborhood or a city and you're trying to make new friends and you're the one that's vulnerable because you have no one, right? And you're putting yourself out there to try to build relationships with people. But the people that you're trying to build relationships with are the people who are like settled in whatever place it is or group of friends that they have. So it's like, of course, it's always like nice to have another new friend, but they have less to lose. So they're in like a power dynamic with you where like they hold all the power because it's like, oh, impress me almost, right? Like you have to impress me to make me want to open myself back up to make new friends because I have enough friends of my own now. I don't necessarily need you versus like you need them. So I think that's also part of it. It's just like it's really intimidating as someone who's trying to break into existing groups or people who have established certain rapport already with, you know, wherever you're trying to break into because you're the only one that's like putting yourself out there. They're just like, okay, take it or leave it. I don't really care. Like,
do you also feel like it's harder to make friends now though because everyone now that you've had a couple of years of experience under your belt is more selective about the people that they actually want to make friends with. And as a result, I think you can deprioritize certain interactions with people that are new because you're kind of like prejudging them based off of your historical knowledge of red flags. And you're like, oh no, like this person does not appear to be like a good use of my time and they probably won't be a good friend.
I feel like there's a fine line there though, where it's like it can veer into judgy zone, but there's also to your point of like you have enough experience now, right? Like we're in our 30s. We talked about this in like one of our past episodes. And so we're at a point where we know ourselves enough now, where we know what does and doesn't work for us, what types of energy or people do or don't work well with us. So I do feel like I know more quickly when it's somebody that like I'm just not gonna vibe with. And I think we're more selective now because we know ourselves better, right? Because when I just had this conversation with one of my friends from high school that I do still meet up with now and then. And we're like, you know, if we were us now, would we be friends with like everybody that we were friends with back then? And the answer is no, because yeah, it was a different environment of why you made those friends. And going back to what I said about you're all in a state of vulnerability, right? There's something about also school environment where you're just kind of like, oh, if you're nice to me, I'll be nice to you too. Like, let's just be friends because it can be kind of judgy, especially during like puberty age of kids, right? So you're willing to be friends with kind of whoever, as long as like you're both willing to be nice to each other and like hang out with each other. As opposed to now, it's like if you don't have anything in common with them or you don't feel any connection with them, you realize now the toll it takes on you, like energetically and time-wise, to invest in somebody else, that you start kind of making that mental calculation of like, is it worth it to invest in this friendship if I'm not feeling that connection with that person? Hey listeners, wondering how you can support us? The biggest way is by increasing our visibility by following us on Instagram at Where Are You From Pod, on TikTok at But Where Are You Really From, subscribing to our YouTube channel under But Where Are You Really From Podcast, rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, and telling your friends. The more people we can get to listen to the show, the more we can continue spotlighting different perspectives and stories. And if you feel so inclined, we're also accepting donations at buymeacoffee.com/whereareyouFrom. Thanks, y'all.
Do you feel like as you've gotten older, the friends you make are more alike with you and your values than when you were younger? Because I feel like it's a little tricky. Like I have a core friend group from college who I feel like we were very similar in college, but we're not so much now, but we're still friends because there's this history between us. But I feel like for a lot of people, their friend groups tend to mirror themselves more as they age. And I'm just wondering if you are having that experience.
Yes and no. It's kind of interesting for me because we had been nomadic. So I wasn't seeing my old friends all the time and I was encountering new people all the time. What's happening is we are, like when I say we, me and Ramon, we're already quite different. And when I look at his friends, I'm like, you have a lot of like kind of similar friends. Not to say that that doesn't invalidate them and like the experiences they bring and like perspectives and whatever. And they're not like carbon copies of each other, but it does run into like same kind of circle. For me, when I think about some of the new friends that I've made in the last few years, if you line them all up, they wouldn't necessarily look like you wouldn't necessarily know what they have in common. But there are some aspects of each of them that vibe really well with whatever part of life I'm currently at. So like spiritually, self-growth, blah, blah wise, I have like certain people that I vibe really well with on that. Other people, I vibe with the idea of like working for yourself, doing some sort of like creative venture or like freelancing or like making your own schedule, having the freedom to like travel around or do your own thing. That's like one aspect. Another aspect is just people who enjoy cultural exchange, for example. So like a lot of the people we met in Japan, it's like they're really interested in like learning from us because we come from the States or Spain or whatever, and we're very interested in them because they have a lot to share about Japan and how they grew up and all that. So I'm noticing pieces of people that are similar to me or similar to other people that I've made friends with. But you as like an outsider observing all these people would not be like, I automatically understand why they all are your friends, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I actually feel the same way. It's like there's a high degree of alignment on a very specific element and interest that we both share. But the rest of it, not necessarily. Like, I feel like a lot of friends, like, we overlap on a very specific thing. And then outside of that, we're, like, totally different people.
What about things you don't align on anymore or friends that, like, aren't worth it anymore? Have you had that come across your mind throughout your life? Like, I certainly have because I have lived in so many places in my life. I'm not even saying I've had, like, fallout, like specific fallouts necessarily with people, but I have had so many friends in different places that naturally kind of fall off my friendship meter. And it's not like I hate them. It's not like we got into a big fight or anything, but whatever connection we had was too tenuous or like circumstantial that it wasn't strong enough to survive the like us not being in the same place all the time. Or like for me, one of the things I maybe have talked about on the show before, but I definitely talk about a lot with my friends that I still am friends with, is like I don't believe any friendship is worth it where only one person is putting in the effort. So if I'm always the person who's reaching out to be like, hey, should we like catch up? Hey, should we hang out? And like you just like grace me with your presence now and then, like that's not a real friendship. You don't really care about me in that way. So I don't really invest in friendships where it feels really one-sided that way. Or it feels like we don't really have that much in common once you remove the like, we don't work at this company anymore that we're just like bitching about our boss all day, or You know, we don't go to the, like, I had a CrossFit group of girls that I was like really close with in New York, and like we have nothing really in common now, so we don't talk to each other anymore. There's like a lot of those kinds of groups of people that naturally fell out for me, and I don't feel any which way about like those friendships dissipating. Like if they reached out again, I would definitely, you know, reconnect, but I'm not like crying every day because I don't have those friends anymore.
It's been a hard learning lesson for me because I feel like I'm the kind of person that I'm a very open book. I don't like this term, but it's like I wear my heart on my sleeve. Like I'm not trying to hide anything. So like I feel like I could become friends with someone if they match my energy very quickly. And I hate letting things go. So even when it's a small friendship, I'm like, oh no. But like there are friends for many different things. And when that common thing isn't there anymore, the friendship just doesn't exist. And that's okay. Like people come in and out of your life all the time. And I think it's the same with you, where most of the friendships that don't exist anymore, they kind of just, there was no falling out. There was no drama. It just was like the circumstances that gave life to the friendship were no longer there. And then it just became too hard to stay in contact because the person is no longer here, or they are very focused on their own life or whatever. I don't think I've actually had a falling out with a friend where it's like we have diametrically different views on something, and so like we got in a fight or something like that. There are definitely instances where I'm like, why am I friends with this person? And it's actually kind of a good thing. Like it forces me to think about like, what about this person right now that I'm friends with, because they're still my friend, is so annoying me. And it actually creates like an introspection moment where I'm like, oh yeah, like I don't like this particular thing. And it's like a new learning for me.
Why don't we end on a fun thing or a positive thing? Where have you found the most success in making new friends in this adult stage of your life?
Through existing friends, honestly, friends to friends.
Mine is a mixed bag. That is one way. Like some of the people that we are friends with now in Asia, for example, is through friends of friends. And ironically, some of them were like closer to them now than the original friend is to that friend. Because we just spent so much time with them in Asia, right? A random other way, especially if you are somebody who is going to like move to a new place or like live abroad or whatever, if you ever participate in anything kind of like an Airbnb experience or like any sort of language or cultural exchange thing, like I'm doing Chinese class now, right? Like online to improve my vocab before we go back to Taiwan. And like I jive really well with the teacher that I have. And we've already loosely talked about like, hey, I'm going to be there in like December. Should we like hang out? And she's like, yes. So there's like those kinds of friendships. And, you know, we had Frank from 5 a.m. Ramen on the show so far back, right? But like we met him because we literally went on one of his ramen tours and we really liked his personality. And we're like, hey, you want to like hang out sometime? And now he's one of the people that we're friends with in Tokyo. And like we hit up every time we were back there. So that has actually worked out really well with me. It's like if you participate in some of these activities where you're getting to know like the new city that you're checking out or like an activity or a cultural thing, and you really vibe with the person who's like leading that thing, ask them if they want to hang out sometimes, like outside of the context of that thing, because also a lot of these people are more independent, like freelancey type people, right? So like they also don't necessarily have a built-in structure of office friends or anything. So sometimes they're more open to meeting and like making friends with new people as well, because they're not often approached in that way to like start new friendships. So that's been a fun one that has worked quite well for us, actually.
Awesome. Well, listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode. We hope you are vibing and feeling the same way. But we do hope that you have lots of friends. And we would love to hear from you, actually. Where do you guys typically find success in making friends now in your adulthood? Is it a bar? Is it a cultural exchange? Is it friends of friends? We'd love to hear from you in the comments below and on our socials.
And come back next week because we will have another fresh episode for you then. And until then,
再见, bitches.